Welcome to Faithfulcrum, a podcast in which Scott and Mark have conversations about faith, spirit, creativity, meaning, and almost anything else. We don't always agree, so you don't have to either. But we do agree that a good conversation sometimes makes a great song. Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
I'm all right. It's a little bit later than usual for us.
It is, yeah. We scheduled a little bit later. And I've got a blizzard coming in tonight, so hopefully we'll get done in time for me to go grab some groceries.
The conversation starts under weather. A storm approaching like a deadline, like something we forgot to deserve. We talk about inheritance before the snow arrives, as if hardship were a curriculum, as if cold were a teacher. The road will vanish tonight, no proof of effort, only the act of going out for groceries, for survival.
You, I think, had some ideas maybe about some place to start with this conversation today in this episode.
Sure. In fact, I listened a bit to the last one just to get some anchor points.
Yeah.
One thing that you said, and we kind of came, it was part of a conversation, talking about how maybe we think that the people who come after us, the next generation, that everyone should have to go through the things we had to go through. That
Oh, yeah.
somehow that's what growing up is, and that's what being responsible is, and that's what, it's just, I had to do it, so now you have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that somehow maybe our children or our grandchildren won't learn the lessons they need to learn unless they go through the stuff I went through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. I think that's a great thing. I think that's a good place for us to get started. Fortunately, we have a wonderful colleague of mine here, Brady Licht. He works at the same place where I work. We work in education in general, but Brady's got some real wonderful expertise in AI and designing learning spaces, done a lot of online instruction design and some other things like that. And he's got a lot of other things going on in his life. And I'm going to let him tell us all about himself. And Brady, we kind of hover around AI, creativity, spirituality, etc. And so any of those, including etc., is open game.
Sounds great. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. So my name's Brady, and I should start by saying, we're talking about the next generation. I'm generally in the spaces I'm in. I seem to be on the younger side still. I'm right at 32 right now, but feeling older and older every day with a kiddo now in my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, I design learning experiences, and I'm interested in technology and education in both the ways it supports and also, unfortunately, sometimes fails students as well, and how we can kind of think about technology in a way that is more critical and more influential. And so one of the things that I bring to that in my work is I try to include a lot of different lenses. And so I try to be very holistic about just my experiences with my work. And so, I think the short of it is I do online learning, but I try to think about things more broadly like we all do. So sometimes that means connections to things like this whole realm of calm design or game design, but also a lot of spiritual practice as well. So, I mentioned, I talk about it pretty frequently. I can talk about my own experiences with it, but I'm a Zen Buddhist for whatever that means, a Zenny.
Yeah.
And the Sambo Kyodai, a white plum Asanga tradition and everything. And I've been practicing that for about 4 or 5 years now. And I bring that as well into my work and creativity and all the different things I wrestle with. So it all kind of gets mixed together, the peanut butter and the chocolate, making the Reese's cup.
Yeah, that's great.
So,
Yeah.
Well, glad to meet you. Glad to meet you, Brady.
It's really...
I'm a big fan of Zen. There are two kinds of texts that I can't hardly overstate how much I love. And they are the enlightenment story, how a disciple got enlightened by an encounter with generally a master, and then the koans, the kind of mystery riddles that don't make any sense, that kind of confound the human mind. One of my favorite enlightenment stories is um, the master and the student they're out someplace, and some birds fly by, and the student says, "Oh, beautiful birds flying by," and now they're gone. And the teacher takes off his slipper and starts whacking him in the face with it and says, "How could they ever be gone?" I just love that story. And of course, in that moment, the student achieves enlightenment. But I was just bringing this up with a friend of mine just a couple days ago, and he said, "Well, it worked that time, but I bet there must be dozens of times that didn't take." And that I realized that kind of Zen master is really just looks like from the outside kind of an asshole.
Well, that's not there's still the possibility they may still be an asshole. That's possible.
Yeah. It's
That's what we were
possible to
talking
be
about. Yeah, that it
Zen
may
and be
just
an
really
asshole.
be. Yeah,
That's right.
The effect
That's
might be the same. I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
The birds pass, and the mind closes the door. Gone, he says, as if absence were real. The teacher answers with a sudden correction. How could they be gone? Pain interrupts the sentence, opens it again. The sky does not disappear when we stop looking. It only waits for us to notice.
Well, in fact, whatever sparks your enlightenment is, that's good. And it could be not that the source is good, but that the enlightenment is good. So,
Yeah. And in the tradition I'm in, it's the lineage. I have the paper around here somewhere of all 83 ancestors back to the historical Buddha
right.
Hmm.
buried away that you complete as a part of Jukai. And in the lineage I'm in, koan practice has been a big thing. And so I would say probably about 3 of the years so far I've been practicing with koans, which is a little different than, some of maybe the perception out there about Zen. So I love
Hmm.
koans. They're a lot of fun, and Zen masters love throwing people in mud and
Yeah.
slapping them over the head and dropping coals in their
Yeah.
hands.
Assholes. My favorite koan is when I can't claim to have any comprehension of what it means, but it goes something like, the cow jumped through the window, her horns made it through, her hooves made it through, her shoulders made it through, her hips made it through, her hind legs made it through, but her tail didn't make it through. Her tail got caught. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to get something out of that, but I still feel like there is something to get out of it.
Yeah. There's always stuff to get out. I mean, that's the fun thing. So like with koan study, it's a curriculum that loops. To use the unfortunate terminology maybe used in South Dakota social studies, it spirals
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
in its own way. And so things come back, and if things don't click, they don't click. And if they do click, they do click. And sometimes more about what you get out of it. I think one of my favorites is it's just the simple count the number of stars in the sky. That's the whole koan right there. Just
Uh-huh.
count the number of stars.
I
Hmm.
don't
Do
think
it.
I'd ever made the connection here, but I studied briefly in my graduate program. I have a degree in fine art, a master's of fine art, so a terminal degree. And I studied briefly a group called Fluxus, which was 60s and 70s maybe. Yoko Ono was a big practitioner, and she, in fact, so one of the things they would produce are kind of instructions for making art. They were
Hmm.
kind of anti-art movement. One guy, I forget his name, maybe Smith. He printed up a box of matches with the label saying for destroying art. So they're kind of anti-art. But Yoko had one that I really love, and that was cut a hole in a canvas. I think she means a painted canvas, and look at the sky through it. That's the whole
Mhm.
instruction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that obviously reminds me of something we talked about earlier, where you had mentioned that you had a frame, and we had talked about how the mere process of calling something a poem makes people read it differently, or calling something art makes people look at it
Right.
differently. And you had given the example of a frame that you used to have, and took it like a party trick. Look through
Yeah.
this frame, and how does that change what you see through it? And so, I'm wondering. I'm wondering how all of this, because I tend to, this way my brain works. I tend to try to draw us back to where we started, so that we can keep spiraling. I wonder how all of this fits with this idea of, the ones coming after me need to go through what I've gone through. Whether we're talking about, I'm going to frame their experiences with my frame so that it impacts how they perceive it. Or if it means pulling out your shoe and bashing them over the head, or whatever it means. I mean, and Brady, I know you have a young one, and I know the young one's pretty young, but I'm wondering if you've done any thinking about this idea of your growing up, the things that you went through, the things that maybe some of them were painful, some of them were joyful, I'm sure, but perhaps they all brought you learning. Have you thought about what that looks like with your child, and what you intentionally pass on or shape for them, and what you just kind of stand back and say, wow, they're going
Yeah.
to find what they find?
I think there's intention, obviously, like, you try to maybe not repeat the mistakes that you see, or you try to do things in a way that you feel is gonna be a positive thing down the road. But as far as what things need to be repeated from the past, I have such a hard time with that. We're at such a young age right now where we're starting to build those traditions. We have
Yeah.
Easter coming up, and so the question is, Easter at the time of this recording is, what do we do for Easter? Do we
Mm,
do
yeah,
we
right.
put eggs outside? Do we do a basket? All these things. And if we don't do those things, are we cutting out some experience that she's not going to have? But the thing is, whether I place those experiences or not, those experiences are going to come, right?
Right.
Like, I struggle with trying to craft things too much to get a desired place where I want them to go.
What do we give the child when belief is optional? Plastic eggs or nothing at all? If we do not stage the morning, does it still arrive? Color leaks in any way, through windows, through neighbors. Tradition is a question posed in advance. We set things out gently, hoping not to decide too much.
Since you brought up Easter, and feel free to talk about this or not, but I know that you yourself grew up in a Christian tradition, that I don't know how you feel about it now. It may be an important piece of you at this point, or it may not be. But I know that shifted a little bit, and I know that, like, for instance, my daughter and her husband are not part of the same tradition that they grew up in, which was the same one I grew up in. And so they have questions like this. They're not doing the whole church thing, certainly not to the degree that we did it with them. And they've got to decide. So how do our kids learn Bible stories? Which Bible stories are important for them to learn? Because it's a huge part of culture. But what context do they learn them in? And what context do we not want them to learn them in? I don't know. That's a struggle, I think, for a lot of folks who have shifted traditions. So I don't know. Do you and your spouse talk about those things?
I think we do. It's hard sometimes, it's always hard to have those conversations maybe about where to draw the line and where to be at with that. For example, we have a lot of extended family that um, is very religious in, like, the Nazarene tradition. We have
Mm,
my wife's father was a Nazarene pastor, and then her father's father was a Nazarene pastor,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so on. And on my side of the family, my whole father's side, very Catholic, and my mother's side, very Lutheran, Protestant, Methodist mix. And so the question is, what do we
Mm.
pass down, and what stories do we tell? And we had that conversation even when family members were giving like books as gifts and stuff. And one of them was
Yeah.
like a My First Bible Stories.
Yeah.
And I think where we're at least is, we leave that on the shelf, we read it, but there's other books too and everything on the shelf, and
Right.
giving that context.
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't want to force anything, but one of the dualities that I find is also there is an importance in tradition, but it has
Mhm.
to be a tradition that you kind of take on. So I mentioned
Mm.
like the Zen thing with the 83 ancestors and all that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty darn in the grand scheme of that, I think pretty conservative in that regard of trying to keep those traditions as is.
Mhm.
We follow the same Kinhin schedule and all that stuff, and all the bows and all those things, because that's something that I walked into of my own volition, and I'm
Yeah.
carrying that piece forward, at least, within my lifetime. That's something I'm opting into, that tradition, and choosing to take that
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So, it's a little bit about power, right? Like, right now, kind of keeping the door open for the kiddo, don't really know what to pass on, but if someone chooses to follow in a tradition, they can't maybe necessarily warp that tradition. They have to kind of come in humbled.
Yeah. Well,
So
and
maybe
one of obviously one of your traditions is choosing your tradition, making a choice about that. And certainly
Right.
that's something that perhaps you're going to pass on in
Yes.
one way or another.
The family tradition is obviously choosing a tradition. When your child chooses a different tradition, she's right there in the family tradition.
Mhm. Yeah,
It seems
that's
to
true.
me.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I hear that. And,
Yeah.
there's other ways that traditions get carried on too, right? Like there's family foods that we make still, right? There's different all those other pieces. And, on the Easter front, we'll probably still put eggs out, and we'll still talk about the Easter
Mhm.
bunny and all that stuff, and we'll still talk about it in the greater cultural context. But maybe when she gets older, we'll have a question as to why dad's not going to church on Easter or
Sure.
something. But
Yeah.
Right. Well, the idea of like Bible stories for children and all that, that actually kind of leads me further into my topic, because it's not just generally about believing that other generations that follow us should go through what we've gone through. I have kind of some specific ideas about what
Mhm.
we think is good for the future in
Mhm.
generations. But when you look at Bible stories, one of my favorites and one of the really fundamental ones, and one that children love, is Noah. So Noah is a story about animals.
Mhm.
It's about a guy who kind of cares for animals. That's cool, and children love it. But it's also about the total destruction of all life on earth
Mhm.
by a jealous God, a God who is revolted by his own creation. And I
Yeah.
think so. In my mind, I kind of picture, so there's Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the children of Noah and their wives, who don't evidently merit a name, and their children and whatnot. And I kind of picture, Ham or Japheth or, you know, whatever, telling his kids, the total devastation of life on earth was good enough for me and my dad. It's good enough for you.
Mm.
What you need, what your generation needs, is a giant flood. Only because we have the caveat at the end that the rainbow is a promise that God's not going to do it again. I mean, he repented of making man, but evidently he repented of destroying humankind.
Mhm.
And so he's not going to do it again. He swears this is the last time, he promises.
Mm.
The animals are remembered, the water is not. A story trimmed for small hands' fur instead of drowning. Somewhere the world ends quietly, completely. And we call it lesson. We call it care. The ark floats in every retelling, untouched by consequence. But the rain keeps speaking underneath the telling.
of feel like this is my kind of premise, and I have an even more narrow one, but let's see where this goes. I kind of feel like we think that the next generation, the people behind us, what we had to go through, that they should have to go through, is judgment. That we've been judged, that God has judged us, or that the world is terrible because of us in some way, and they need to feel that too. Thoughts?
I think I've always thought that one of the first things that develops in a young person going into adolescence is a hyper strong sense of injustice, things that
Yeah.
are just unfair. That is not fair. The first thing you hear from kids when they stand up is, "That's not fair. You're not fair." And there's this, I mean, that's a good developmental stage, I think. I think it's important for them to suddenly realize that there are things that are not fair, but put that on steroids, and what you have is, um, if I'm gonna be punished, you need to be punished too.
Yes.
And this sense that, needs a good whipping.
Yes.
And I feel like, I we struggle not to just wholeheartedly jump into politics, but right now, I feel like that is something that is driving our nation in a strong way. There is this sense that the world's got to pay, and being the big daddy with the whip means we're going to make them pay. And to some degree, the unfortunate thing about that is the irony that when you become the authoritarian, you visit your authority on everyone except yourself.
Yes. We clearly have to pay. I mean, if everyone has to pay, we have to pay too. That's the thing. And I do think that is, everyone, I think, feels it. The minute we all start wielding the rod so we won't spoil the child, you know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
everyone knows that rod must come back on us. It must come
Right.
back on us. It will and must.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an act, but it also becomes just a totalizing view of the world, that there is someone who must do something who is not me, and there's this sense that they need to have something done to them. But
Yeah.
it's a dreadful thought, but it's a comforting thought too, right? Because then that means there is a dad out there who's gonna
Yes.
fix things versus,
Yes.
it's a way to not take responsibility for the world as
Oh,
is,
yeah.
right? So that's
This is kind of where I'm heading. I once wrote a song. It was actually in a political, historical situation, not unlike the one we're in now. Um, the song consists almost entirely of just like one refrain. It's a good thing there is no righteous avenging God. Because if there was a righteous avenging God, we'd be in trouble. And so it's like the thing is, the minute you invoke a righteous avenging God, you are calling down judgment on yourself. Yeah. And we have right now, talking about the political scene or whatever, we have this kind of sense that the world must pay, but we are part of the world. And so I think it is it's barely subconscious or barely unconscious desire to pay. We're waiting for judgment. We're hoping for judgment. We're waiting for God to judge the earth, right? And that includes us. And as much as we talk about how we're the righteous ones, everyone must fear that moment of being seen, and everyone seeing everything, and knowing the secrets that you whispered in the inner room or shouted from the rooftops. There must be a moment I think we feel there must be a moment where we will all face judgment, and that is terrifying. But we're using that terror, we're trying to enforce that terror on others, but the moment we list that terror in our aid, we subject ourselves to the possibility of that terror.
We want something to come and settle it. A voice, a force of final accounting. We aim it outward like a weapon, forgetting the circle drawn around us. To be seen entirely is unbearable. Still we call for it, as if it will spare us.
Well, we obsess, understandably, about something like the Epstein files, and that distracts. It may be just, but it also distracts. That's become a distraction from what is currently going on, or what I'm guilty of. And I feel like there's another side to this in our particular country, and that is some of us, and I'll include myself in this. We've had the luxury in the past of feeling sort of okay about our country. Like, not that it's ever been perfect, but golly, it's a lot better than a lot of other places. And a little bit of capacity to feel okay about that and kind of proud about that. And now I regularly wake up and say, what is my country doing now? We're invading who? For what reason? And what are we doing? And how many little girls in a school did we kill? What? And this is me. This is my tax money. This is my country that I vote. I vote to try to get people, good leaders in. This is who we are now. And so, there's that other side of, I'm certainly shocked by the demons that are pointed out in the world. I never thought that I would, years and years ago, when the Iran hostage situation
Oh,
happened,
wow.
I never thought there would come a time when I would feel a little bit sorry for the Ayatollah.
Okay. Well, it is a
Now,
long time
maybe
ago.
that's a step too far, but I feel like, who in the world are we to go in bombing people
Sure.
and killing lots of little schoolgirls in the process?
Yeah.
And is that the country I'm part of?
I think it's where there's a couple things there. I think it's partially where you draw the line. And I think, at least for my generation, maybe there's a maybe an overhanging presence that, and I think a greater awareness that we're in the imperial core, right?
Yeah.
To borrow a
Yeah.
Marxist phrase, right? We benefit from all these things, and the cushion I'm sitting on, to the apple I eat, to all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of suffering in everything we do, and it's a lot easier to feel like, if we get everyone on the Epstein list and then put them all in jail and everything and all that, and that will make things better, because it's partially a way of, I think, not looking in the mirror. And that doesn't mean, taking responsibility, like maybe off the track a little bit, but people should recycle. Yes.
Okay.
People also should work towards systems that create less pollution, right?
Right.
It's a yes and. So I think I hear what you're saying. There's maybe a way in which people will use, like, the greater political climate as a way to not deal with their surroundings. And there's a way where people also shut down with that greater political climate and just look at their surroundings, right? They're just looking at, did I help my neighbor? And the thing with being a human is it's hard to do all of it, but
Yeah.
you have a responsibility to do what you can do. A word I keep coming back to is, in my practices, and I mentioned it earlier, is this idea of atonement. In a Western sense, there's atonement as in, like, you feel sorry for something. You feel like something has to
Right.
be made up or
Right.
resolved, right? That, that dad comes home and he visits righteous vengeance on the world, or that I go in and I confess my sins, and that will atone. In a Zen sense, at least in my experience, and that's all I can really speak for. I can't speak for everyone on the path. Atonement, as I understand it, in the Zen tradition, means to be quite literally at one with. So making peace with things as they are. And that doesn't mean sleeping or closing your eyes, but saying, this is the reality and we have to do the work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
taking responsibility.
Definitely. I've suffered from idealism all my life, but I am definitely, and for some long time, I believe that what I can't alter, I must turn to my advantage. That's the thing I think, is that what I can't change about the world around me, I must use. Because those things I can't change are solid things, and I can use those solid things as leverage to pull myself towards the goal I want, and to hopefully drag some small part of the world, if only myself, towards that the reality I want. But I will say, I think I have not been, maybe Scott, as much as you, I haven't been the current state of affairs has not shocked me to the same extent as
Mhm.
it appears to have shocked many of my peers.
Mhm.
I know and have known for decades that I live in a gulag state with the largest percentage of its
Yeah.
population in prisons of any
Yeah.
culture
Yeah.
on earth in
Yeah.
history.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm well aware of that. And so I believe I'm living in a police state. And those things are the things I see now are less shocking to me because of that. But I'll tell you what has made me proud or made me think of America and my country and my part of the world as being um, admirable. Uh, Little things like this. When I first, I spent 2 years not too long ago, about well, it's getting to be almost a decade ago, 8 years ago. I spent 2 years in the Eastern Hemisphere of the planet. I didn't set foot in the Western Hemisphere for two full years. I was living in South Korea. I vacationed in Japan and Australia. And when I came back to the United States, I'm standing. There are two lines when you enter customs to the United States. I don't know if you guys both have done this, I'm sure. There are two lines: U.S. passport holders and everyone else. And so the lines, I'm in one line. I'm in the one with the passport holders, and there are two lines. They're about equal length. They both kind of snake around, and I'm in my line, and I'm looking around at the people in my line, and I can see and hear the people in the other line. It's kind of like I say, they snake around. There are times when I'm very close to those people, and I can't tell by looking or listening which line I'm in.
Hmm.
The languages being spoken in my line
Yeah.
are as multitudinous and varied as the languages being spoken in the other line.
Yeah.
And the skin tones and the mannerisms in my line are as varied and as multitudinous as those in the other line. I can't tell if I'm in the right line by looking or listening. To me, that is something about America that seems to me exceptional. I think it's the only country like that on earth.
Two lines, but no difference language dissolves the border. Voices overlap, like weather systems. You cannot locate yourself by listening. Skin, accent, gesture, all rearranged. Belonging becomes a kind of noise. You stand where you stand, and that is enough. Two lines, but no difference language dissolves the border. Voices overlap, like weather systems. You cannot locate yourself by listening. Skin, accent, gesture, all rearranged. Belonging becomes a kind of noise. You stand where you stand, and that is enough.
I mean, in Brazil, there's a lot of different ethnicities all living together in relative peace. But there aren't every language on earth being spoken there at the kind of same rate. When I lived in Chicago, I'd sit on the train and hear 6 different languages, none of them English. And those moments, I felt like I was living in some place different from other places on earth. I don't know of another land where so much variation in culture, language, religion, ethnicity is just de facto. I was asked once in Mexico. I was living in Mexico for a couple of years, and my Spanish teacher asked me, what language is spoken in the United States? And I said, all of them. And she seemed mad at me.
Yeah.
But she said, well, how many are native to America? And I said, dozens. Because I was thinking of Native American languages, and she seemed still not to like that answer. But that is the truth of my understanding of America. Every language on earth is spoken in my country.
Yeah. Do you worry that those days are numbered?
No, I don't. Just no.
You think the the powers that are pushing in that direction are not going to be
Well,
successful?
America would utterly collapse without even just okay, just to get political, just
Yeah.
the idea of illegal aliens. Do you have,
Yeah.
or does anyone have a number to put on the value illegal aliens contribute to our economy? Because it's clearly in the billions.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's enormous, and we can't count it because they're illegal. We don't know
Yeah.
the number because they're illegal, because they're being paid under the table. It's like when they talk about controlled substances like heroin or cocaine. You make them illegal, they're uncontrolled. We don't know what's in it. Are they putting ground glass in the heroin, this, baby laxative, Santa flush in the heroin? Do we know? No, we don't know, because we've chosen not to know. And that's what we've done with illegal aliens. We've just chosen not to know. So it must
Mhm.
be billions. It must be hundreds of billions, but we can't talk about it because we don't know those numbers, because we willfully don't want to know.
Yeah.
What I hear you saying, and this goes back to the earliest piece, is this sense of that something needs to come back. But I think what there's also a sense of maybe and I think it's in every generation, but I think it's maybe more. And I can't speak for older generations, right? But like I can say at least there's a sense that it's a given. And in my generation, that there's a sense of pre-apocalypse. And I don't mean
Mm.
apocalypse in like the movies, but in the sense of some type of change, right? And that every generation thinks they're the last ones, right?
Yeah.
But
I don't think that was always true, but it is definitely. Scott, did you think there would be an atomic war before you died, Scott, when you were a kid?
Yeah. Okay, I don't I think I thought it was a possibility. I think I have been an optimist though. I really have. I think I've been a foolish, nothing can hurt me kind of optimist.
Yeah. Okay.
And I've learned as I got older. In fact, right now I'm in miserable shape because my back went out this last
Oh, I'm sorry to
weekend.
hear that.
And well, it's still misery. And so I realize, the smallest thing can take me out. And so, yeah, I think cognitively, I'm prepared for whatever, but
Yeah.
it still shocks me, to see people saying or doing things that I just never thought we'd be in the position where we would hear a president say that, or we'd hear
Yeah, yeah.
someone
I wanna
in
just step
leadership
back.
say that.
Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
just step back for a second, because this is where I'm headed. Heidi, was there something I interrupted you there. Was there, you wanted to say something?
what I was going to say was, with that sense of a apocalypse, one of the things that I love and I love talking about is I love science fiction and speculative fiction. And
Excellent.
one of my favorite things is speculative fiction and science fiction by indigenous writers, by queer writers, BIPOC, the marginalized groups to one degree or another writer. And one of my favorites books out there is, I think it's Marine. This is, as soon as you say something's your favorite, that's when you forget an important
Yeah, right,
detail.
right,
The book's
exactly.
title is China Mountain Jang, and the author is Maureen something. Anyways, the protagonist of the book is one of the only major science fiction novel protagonists who he is a gay male, and he is, without getting into the weeds of it, he is Hispanic and Chinese, but he has had facial reconstruction surgery to look fully Chinese because of this world they're living in.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the line that sticks out to me in this book over and over, and I think about this with systems and with apocalypses and the political climate and all these things, is that systems are big and people live in the cracks. And then the book
Mm.
that's presented as this both unfortunate thing about living under communism or capitalism or being gay in a society that doesn't care for that. But it's also, I think, a through line through what I kind of view as the future. There's, regardless of what happens, climate disaster, all these things, people are going to survive, and there's some hope in that, but it's not going to be good, right? Like
Well,
it's
right. The
going
thing
to
is,
be
yeah,
fascism and
yeah,
growing, and
right.
it's apocalypse, but eking out the life we have in that, and people are always
Mm.
going through the apocalypse.
Every generation thinks it is the last. word apocalypse softens with use. Systems expand, people slip into the cracks. Life continues there, thin but persistent. Not good but ongoing. Hope is not bright, it is stubborn.
To just frame, so this is where I've been headed all this time. I didn't want to try to guide it, but I figured it would get here. I think what we believe, fundamentally and unquestionably, that the following generations behind us must experience is premature, I don't want to call it premature, is senescence and death. What if that's not going to be true? Now, I'm a science fiction writer myself. And I do believe, just having looked at it, that maybe it could easily happen. It could happen overnight that we learn to extend the average lifespan to 120. 120 seems to be the kind of human end point, right? There aren't many people over 120, but there are a few that get there. And I do think we could probably push the average closer to 120. We've been doing that for some time. I mean, we now have the oldest president ever inaugurated.
Mhm.
And that's only going to increase, I think, up to a certain point. But what if everyone lived to be roughly, on average, and like we think of 80 for a man, if most men are living to be 110 or 111. And at 111 and at 120, they're like 80-year-olds today. How? We think that would be a terrible outcome of how, that's not how we grew up. But I think, how would we face climate change? We're talking about climate change now in terms of the next 100 years. But if you believed you might live that long, how would your concern be different? And I'll tell you this, if we're living to be 120, it doesn't seem to me to be that much of a stretch to imagine people living to be 500. I mean, you're just talking about the advancement of technology.
I think if people are living that long, the big difference is, like in the Kim Stanley Robinson Mars trilogy, what's really going to happen is there's going to be a whole lot of scenes of old people continuously having endless relationships and too much detail of that in the book. Well, in my opinion.
And
that third book kind of dissolves into just
and in
the
those
nursing
books,
home,
the old people
flirting
become a kind of oligarchy.
Yeah.
The old people kind of control everything. But imagine a world in which the old people controlled everything, but they had no intention of dying anytime soon. I mean, in terms of the next century, suddenly humanity would have abandoned the kind of like use it up and go on to the next, that would have to just go away.
It might. You might also have people who say, if I'm going to live that long, I have to hold on to stuff even more. I better
We'll
start
have to hold on to stuff,
investing
but the
even
point is,
earlier to keep that investment going, right?
the point is ecological catastrophe looks terrible to those people, right? It looks awful to those people. Instead of something somebody else has to deal with, it's suddenly something that they will have to deal with. Now, they're on Mars. You're right about that. They're on Mars, so they have another planet to ruin. But here's my premise. I think we believe that we live under the judgment of God. And because of that, our lifespans are severely limited and we get old and die incredibly rapidly. And we think that's the way things should be. But if it stops being that way, are there any advantages to humanity?
I think there's plenty of advantages. If you live long, you don't have to worry about a project falling apart, regardless of what the project is. Even if you want to build the best birdhouse in the world, right? If you know you have 70 years to perfect your craft of building birdhouses versus 30 years of perfecting that craft, right? You're going to take more care. You're going to slow down. I think there'd be a bunch of benefits, but
here's my wondering about that, though. Already, with the longevity that we've achieved thus far, and with the sped up nature of our technological advancement,
that's what we're talking about.
There is a much wider gap between myself a 61-year-old and my grandson who is 5. And it results in not only a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication, but also a good deal of anger. I know that, and this is, my daughters are in your generation, Brady, and I know that they are frustrated deeply with a lot of boomers who are just ahead of me. I'm not a
Yes,
boomer.
we're not boomers.
I
Thank
have to tell
goodness for
people
that.
that. I have to tell people that all the time.
Yes,
But
right. I
I've
mean,
been corrected by Gen X folk before. Don't worry.
yeah, you could easily have
but
been a boomer. Yeah,
but
I think we know at least one guy who's just like 26 days older
yeah, he is a
than
boomer.
me,
He is
who's
a
a
boomer.
boomer.
He is a boomer. But here's the deal. It has created a lot of stress because those folks are living longer. They're needing to be supported. And
Yeah.
additionally, the culture that they grew up in is so fundamentally different than the culture the younger people are growing up in. And as we get older, it appears to me that quite often, most often, we become less capable of adjusting our capacity for communication. Now,
Yeah.
I don't want to say that
Uh-huh.
across the board, but
What do you mean
that's
adjusting our
that's
capacity
the trend.
for communication? What do you mean by that?
I mean, understanding what those young folks are saying or what they're doing or why they do
You
that
kind of
stuff
mean
or
set in
what
your
they
ways, right? You become set in your ways.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting that that's not just being narrow and conservative. It is a product of getting older. Now,
Yeah.
perhaps
I agree.
longevity of
I agree.
living might change that some. That'd be
Well,
great if I could live to be 200 and be brilliantly learning like
yeah.
a child that whole time.
Well, we have witnessed it, Scott. I mean,
Yeah.
remember when you were 13? How many 80-year-old men did you know? You know what I
Not
mean?
many.
Not
60 was you're on the edge of death.
on the edge of death. And it's not just because you were young and you thought, oh, they're very old. It was the case.
Yeah, yeah.
So what we see now is people, I mean, David Byrne is 80. I mean, so many great
The
creative.
Beatles.
Yes. Paul
Goldie
McCartney must be
Hawn.
109.
Goldie Hawn is 81.
So many creative, um, um, thinking people are still doing okay now at 80, and that was not the case. So, neuroplasticity has improved. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it has also expanded. Look, nobody wants to live to be 200 if you have to be 200 in 1970 years.
Yeah,
In
right.
1970, by the time you were 100, of course, today, by the time you're 100, you're pretty much falling apart. When you were, like we were saying, when you were 60, you were falling apart. So nobody wants to be that, but we're not seeing that. So we've definitely we can see it already in our lives, that the neuroplasticity and what do you call it's not longevity, but it's like healthgevity or something. There's like a
A different kind of measurement.
it's a different measurement of like how long you can be healthy.
Yeah.
And that's what everyone wants. Nobody cares about longevity, but they just want to be healthy longer. But if you're healthy longer, you live longer. That's the way that is.
Right.
So all I know is I'm just saying, we think that we're not worthy as a human species to live longer, that would be a terrible thing. When people go, what about the population explosion? Well, we're already living longer, and there are places all over the planet where population is in the negatives. In Japan and parts of Europe, they're not reproducing enough in order to maintain their population, which is great as far as I'm concerned. So, I mean, I think we see natural buffers for this. All I can say is I think fascism is a death cult.
Yeah.
People who are going to live don't want that.
No.
But they do want control, and the older people might have more control. But an oligarchy of old people who expect to go on living and want to go on living and think that going on living is the goal, that doesn't seem as bad to me as what we got, because we have people who just feel like they're going to die, so they better get everything they can get now. I'm not talking about a utopia. I'm just saying if we just escaped the judgment of God that says that we must, what is it?
He limited their days to 120. That's from Genesis. Something.
Yeah, well, in fact, it's later. There's two Genesis lifespans. The second one is what is 20 years as a score? So 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Yeah. 30 and 10. So that's the second one. 30 and 10. And then it says, and maybe by dint of strength, another 10, 80 years. That's where we're living. We're still there. But I do think it might happen. And I think we should prepare ourselves for the positive results. Right now, we should begin building the sense of stewardship of the planet and of human life that's going to be needed when people do live longer. Because right now, I do feel like we have high level advisors and government officials saying what the real world is the law of the jungle. That's a quote. And that came from when we invaded Venezuela and took out the leader of Venezuela and kidnapped him and brought him to America, right? It's the law of the jungle, and we're the apex predator. Those are the words, right? But do you want to continue to live in that world? You know what I mean? How long can you be apex predator? Somebody was going to come along and be the next apex predator, and it would be better for you if the world you had created didn't involve metaphors about who's predating on who else, in human terms.
I think there's some validity in what you're saying. I think it is a broad brush though, because I do think there's a good number of people who are just fine with dying around 80 or 75 or whatever, not because they think that that's the right thing or the God ordained thing, but because they see it as a cycle, and that death, living a good life, doing everything you can, and then dying, not fighting it, just saying, hey, here's the next step, and being okay with that. And so I also feel like there is potentially a real desperation among some who want to push to 120, to 150, to 200. It's a desperation that comes out of, I don't know, I've got all this stuff, I want to keep it, maybe. But I don't know that it's as black and white as, maybe you're not saying that, but.
Yeah, I'm not trying to paint some kind of utopia. I'm trying to imagine a world with that change, and I can see that change I think that change might be coming, and I can see that post-change world being worse or better depending on how we face that change now.
Right. No, I agree. And I think there is nothing wrong. I've always said I wanted to live a long time. In fact, I think I said I was going to live to 140. That's what I started saying when I was really young, because I wanted to live to see 2064.
Yeah.
I wanted to see 2100.
Yeah.
So, but as I've gotten older, I've also kind of let go of that because I'm kind of like, that'd be fine. But as long as I'm feeling okay, as long as my back gets better.
Right. I hope your back gets better.
I think with life, in my own life, I had a bunch of medical issues late in college and everything. And I remember thinking at the time, any day after today is a bonus day.
Yeah.
Rather than,
And
that's really where I'm at. I don't it'd be great to live a long time. And, if that's on the horizon, planning and thinking about how that will impact things is great, but there's nothing to say I don't just drop dead here and stuff like that. And there's a lot of things that would be left undone, right? The kiddo would have to grow up without me, the projects, the work, the career, the passions, those would be gone. But that's not my control right now. So it's a strange thing. I think you want to hold on, you want to grab power, you want to keep it. You want to live the longest life you can if you view your life as just your life. If you view your life as a part of everything else, I think it at least lessens that desire.
I do think in a world in which people are living to be quite old, we're going to need spirituality. We're going to need Zen.
We're going to need art. We're going to need art.
Art more than ever. We're going to need those things, not less, but more. Because people say, and this is kind of where, I guess this is my summation. People say it's death that gives life meaning. I totally understand that. We're not talking about eliminating death. Imagine you could, I don't know, upload your consciousness to a computer embedded in a black hole. Fine. Black holes evaporate.
Yeah.
There is no eternity for anyone.
Sure.
So death is always going to be there. It's just that we just plunge into it. We are hardly aware of ourselves before we're on the way to death. And it
Hmm.
would be nice if we could experience life more fully for longer and appreciate it more.
Yeah.
Death is always going to be there. It's not going away. But I feel like life is so short, and that's why people are as selfish and as brutal as they are, because it's so short and uncertain. But if it became much more certain and much longer, I'm not saying that people wouldn't be brutish and cruel. I just think that that would mitigate those things. It would be
Yeah.
brutish and cruel in a way that has less to do with imminent death, theirs and other people's. I just think that would be. I believe it's coming, and it could happen. It literally could happen overnight. And
We arrive already leaving, barely aware. A life compressed into urgency. What if the horizon moved? What if it stayed? Long enough for care to become ordinary. Death would wait without pressure. And we might finally learn how to remain.
that we could extend our lives to 120 or so, whatever.
Yeah.
And we're not prepared for it because we keep preparing for the apocalypse.
Yeah.
We keep preparing for the end times.
Well,
And that kind of promise of longer life could be, I believe, many people in the religious communities would condemn that because that's not God's plan, right? There are
Yeah.
some things men was not meant to know, etc.
yeah. Yeah.
And I just want to prepare us as a species for greater success than we probably deserve.
Yeah. Well, you know,
Deserve is a funny word, but
I think I don't have the quote right, but I think it was Thoreau who, when he was talking about why he went into the woods, it was so that he would not die having found out that he had never lived.
Never lived. That's him.
Yeah. And so, extending the life, extending the existence without actually living is not better. The quality of being alive, of doing the things that are living, that are life-giving, that are sustaining to myself and to others, however long that life goes, is I would think is the goal. And we have an opportunity, if we do live longer, to make that mean something or to make it mean nothing. And that is going to be up to the spirituality, the art, the artists, the creators, the thinkers, the lovers in the world who make the world better by what they do.
And the learners.
And the learners, absolutely.
I want to be,
And I think,
if I want to live, I want to go on learning. If I can't go on learning, I'm done.
well, this is to round it off to the beginning. For me to say my grandson has to go through what I went through really speaks volumes about the fact that I'm no longer learning. It
Right.
means that
You're right.
I'm
That's
closing him off.
analysis, yeah.
I'm closing him off because it's a closed system.
It's a closed
Learning is a
system.
closed system.
You've been
Well-
through it and you're done with it. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
If lifelong learning is the goal for me as an educator, I'm sure it's high on your priority lists. When I think about what I do as a teacher, I think what I'm trying to instill in my students is the idea of extending the experimental period to your entire life.
Yeah.
Rather than knowing things, it's about experimenting and
Yeah.
finding things out and trying
Right.
things. If I
Right.
can just if I can do that, I always feel like I'm not downloading information. That information will be in my field will be absolutely useless 5 years from now.
yeah. Yeah.
It's got to be about, because I teach in a I teach game design. So a highly technical field, AI has come along just in the last couple of years, and I am not prepared to train students for a world that will not exist. But I can't know what the technology is going to be. I must train students to discover, to
Yeah.
find out, to experiment, to try, to be prepared
To be
for
learners.
those things. That's what I feel like.
Well, thank you for the discussion. It's been great. Here in just a moment, Brady, I'm going to give you a chance to plug anything that you want to plug. Tell us about, anything that's going on in the future. But it is time for us to ask Mark, what sort of musical presence do you sense in this
Yeah.
episode?
I try not to pre-decide these things. I try to let the conversation lead me, but I find that I fall back on something I had thought of at the beginning. So I'm doing that again. I kind of hear because we're talking about something approaching eternity,
Yeah.
a kind of human eternity,
Yeah.
a non judgment day scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I think it should be like 12-line tone poems.
Okay. 12-line tone poems.
Yeah, with like minimal musical arrangement in the along the lines of like new age or ambient.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
I think it might be awful.
I think it's going to be delightful. Because all of them have been in their own way,
I think maybe I would like to hear at least one female voice in there, but maybe mix it up.
At least one. Okay. Yep. We'll keep it mixed up. That's great. All right. Hey, Brady, is there anything you'd like to share with us, share with the listeners? We don't know how many there are, but I know there are some that to make us aware of.
I put all my writings up on bradylicht.com. I keep it simple with all my professional portfolio and my
Spell your name, Brady.
About life. BRADHT.
I think, and maybe do it again if you would.
BHT.com. Beyond that website, the important bit is we've been putting out suet feeders lately, and we've been getting into backyard birding and all this.
Excellent.
And we had a northern flicker, a whole bunch of them, like 2 or 3 in the neighborhood, just hanging out for the last couple days.
Awesome.
And so
That is fantastic.
That's been the thing I would like to highlight is maybe put out a bird feeder or something if you don't have one.
Oh, that's great.
Brady, just in the last month, a study was published, I believe, that bird watchers retain their neuroplasticity longer.
Yeah, that's absolutely, I believe that.
I'll remember that looking at the ducks and everything. And next time I quack back at them, they can quack back at me.
You'll remember that when you're still learning at 175.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. All right.
Glad to meet you, Brady.
Thank you, Brady. Thanks, Mark. We'll see you next time.
If you'd like to hear more conversations like this one and hear a few more songs, just subscribe to Faithfulcrum on your favorite podcast platform or go to faithfulcrum.com where you'll find all of our first season episodes and every episode yet to come. This has been Faithfulcrum.
Every time I see a vision is the same planet ghost. I can feel the different spaces. It comes from me. It doesn't reel dizzy. It doesn't really fit. It doesn't really feel like choosing. It isn't bold. It is brave. Every step I take, every breath I take, every doubt disappears. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't continue. It doesn't change. It doesn't return. I finally be continues. I finally becoming. It comes from becoming the ordered. It comes from becoming the shift. It comes from becoming with everything. It comes from becoming wide. It doesn't break. It doesn't change. It doesn't complain. It doesn't complain. It doesn't feel it. It doesn't fear. It doesn't take. Every time I try to begin again, every time I try to live, every time I try to resist, every time I wake, it doesn't protect, it doesn't break, it doesn't becoming, it doesn't becoming, it doesn't becoming. Every time I told it down, every time I pulled it down, it doesn't becoming slow, it doesn't becoming mine, it doesn't becoming, it doesn't becoming, it doesn't becoming, it doesn't becoming. It doesn't feel that space. It doesn't feel that place. It doesn't feel that time. It doesn't feel that warm. It doesn't feel that silence. It doesn't feel that time. It doesn't feel that space. It doesn't feel that breath. It doesn't feel that truth. It doesn't feel that tyrant. It doesn't feel that's fire. It doesn't feel that's dark. It doesn't feel that still. It doesn't feel that currents. It doesn't feel that space. It doesn't feel that brain. It doesn't feel